What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and welcome to another episode of our First Down Training show. Today, we have a very special guest, Malik Rosier. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Pronounce it the French way. So there's actually two ways. It's Rosier or Rosier. For me, it doesn't matter,
Okay,
but you pronounced it right.
Rosier, got it. Okay, cool. But yeah, former University of Miami quarterback. Really huge guest for us. So appreciate you hopping on, man. How are things going today?
It's going great. Just relaxing. Been hanging out with some quarterbacks. So I always love doing that. But thanks for having me. It's always a good time. Kind of being with guys that are kind of helping guys. Especially young guys trying to get to that next level. So it's always good to connect with people like yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Yeah, and like you just mentioned it, that's primarily our audience. Our audience is primarily just quarterbacks, receivers, their parents, like youth, middle school, high school. So obviously I know that you could give a ton of value to those guys just based off of your playing experience and just some of the stuff that you've seen and obviously the guys that you work with. So we'll get to it. So you're from Mobile, Alabama, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So born in Tallahassee, raised in Mobile, Alabama. I moved to Mobile around like three or four. So
Okay.
basically most of my life.
Nice. And that's where you went to high school as well out
Yeah,
there?
I went to a small high school called Faith Academy. Really good in sports, I would say in some aspects, but for me, I'm a Christian, so it actually really helped me in my kind of faith. But I went to a high school called Faith Academy.
Nice, yeah. And so and that's obviously where kind of the recruiting process started for you, I would imagine. Walk us through what was that like? I know Alabama's, in my opinion, it's a good football state. Just anytime that we've gone out to Alabama, whether it's for camps or maybe they've gone to camps, like kids from Alabama have gone to camps that we've had in Georgia. So what was that recruiting process like for you?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is definitely a lot different than how they recruit now. Obviously, when I was recruited, there's no NIL, so the stuff with like
Hmm.
how much you can make necessarily didn't come into play. It was really more grassroots. One thing that I like that the NCAA wound up overturning that I know a lot of recruits don't like was the unofficial pictures. Where guys would just go in and they're just doing a whole flick shoot and then they're leaving. Right.
Yeah.
And to me, like if that's where your home is, that's where you want to be, there's no problem with that. Right. So I for me, it was more, love your coaches, love your university. Obviously, if you do it right, you should spend somewhere between 3 to 5 years there. Right. So not only do you need to like the coaches that are there, but also the university. So I fell in love with James Coley. Obviously, love Al Golden. Both of those guys. Coley's at Georgia. Al Golden was, the DC at Notre Dame last year. He's done a great job. Right. So I had a lot of coaches that were great recruiters. And one of the biggest things that I always tell my guys is make sure that whenever you get recruited by somebody, don't be a guy, be the guy. Right. And again,
Hmm.
sometimes guys want to go to the big names, right? The Ohio States, the Georgias. But if you're just another guy, you're never going to be on the field. And the point of going to college, especially if you're a gamer and a competitor, is to actually get on the field, right? They should actually make you feel like a king or a prince, or like, hey, when I walk on, this campus, I feel like I am, their guy. So that's a lot of stuff I tell my guys with recruiting because some guys sometimes will get lost in money and this team's paying me more, but I'm like, okay, is it about getting paid more, or is it actually about getting on the field? And that was one thing for me was like, hey, Miami was the only university that not only gave me a chance in football, but also baseball. So my freshman year, I played both sports. It was a very unique combination. I actually had some MLB teams come out and watch me in high school. I did some stuff for like Team USA. And so one reason that really pushed me was I was born a Miami fan. My dad's a huge Miami fan. But also them being, one of the large D1s that let me play both baseball and football was also a big decision making for me.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so that was kind of a question that I had later on that I wanted to ask you because I obviously didn't play at a level that you played at in terms of college ball, and my decision was pretty easy. It was just more like what was the best offer that I had. But I've talked to a lot of guys that have played at D1 schools, and what they all kind of tend to tell me, and obviously, like you said, things are different nowadays with like NIL and things of that nature. But what they all tend to tell me is they like you want to choose like kind of like people over places. That's generally what they try to tell me. Can you like would confirm that probably is what factored into your decision with Miami?
Yeah, of course. The people there have to make you feel like you're at home, right? Because again,
Hmm.
I would say, especially for a lot of guys, most guys live with their parents, right? Again, every situation is different. For the most part, most people have at least one parent over their head, right? Whenever you get to college, there's no one over you. These coaches really are the people that are going to help, guide you through kind of this, hey, I'm coming, and I want to say these guys are kids because some of these guys are bigger than me, right? 6'6", some of these offensive
Yeah.
linemen, right? But you're going from like a boy to a man. You're on your own, right? You're starting to get
Hmm.
money now. You got to make decisions. You got to show up. There's no one waking you up. You're waking yourself up. right? So the people you surround yourself with is very important, right? And I always say, if you can show me the 5 people you spend the most time with, then I can show you what your projection is going to be, right? So whether it's these guys develop well, whether it's hey these guys have very high character, different things like that, I think you should really look into because again. As you get into sports, from a young age, like why did you play sports? So always what I tell my guys, right? For the most part, when you're a youth guy coming up, money isn't a factor, right? It was, hey, this coach made me love football. Hey, like I love this about it, right? And so again, that's one thing that I really push is relationships, right? Whether it's from the low level or high level, right? I always tell my guys, like I have one guy that's getting recruited by some colleges, but they're not the level that he wants to be at. But my biggest thing
Mhm.
is, hey, they got to start somewhere, right? So how do you know in the next 2 to 3 years, because you're a freshman getting recruited going up, that coach that's at, let's say, like Villanova, right? The next 2 or 3 years, he could be at Utah, and you would have no
Yep.
idea. But that relationship, right, that you built will carry over. And again, I know I have one kid specific, and his name is Landon. He did a great job building a relationship with Willie Simmons. So he got an offer at FIU when he was there. Willie went to Duke. He got an offer at Duke. Willie went to
Nice. Yeah.
FIU. He got an offer at FIU. Right. And all that was because he built a connection with someone. And he said, I don't care how big or small it is. I like you as a coach. I like you as a person. And right, that
Mhm.
coach did a great job of building himself out. Now, I have one client that has 2 or 3 offers because the relationship that he's built, and obviously he's a good player, right? But it's really the relationship he's built with the coach that really kind of propelled him to get some of the offers. So it's been different things like that I've really, honed in on a lot of my kids. Is relationships are important because again, that's who's kind of, guides you through life as, you kind of move away from your parents.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, no, that's great. Do you do a lot with the guys that you train? Or do you kind of serve as like almost like a consultant to them in that like realm of recruiting, or do you just kind of like pass on advice, or do you almost act as like, hey, I know this coach, this would fit well, or things of that nature? And where do you do your training? Is it in South Florida?
Yeah, so I do it in Tampa, Naples, Miami. So QB Country, we're a group of guys, and there's about 10 to 11 of us throughout different
Hmm.
states. So I go down. Obviously, I played there, but David Morris had Emory Williams. Our guy in Atlanta has trained both Judd Anderson and Luke Nichols. So I go down to Miami to kind of keep those guys cleaned up. I have a little group there, and obviously I mainly train in Tampa. So for my guys, it's really two ways. So for my parents. I more advise on the camp series, right? So I'm always like, hey, these are certain camps that'll get you recruited. These are certain
Yeah.
camps that, hey, it's more about just going, learning, having a great time, right? Just go out there and say, hey, what can I learn? If it's 1 or 2 things from that camp, then to me that's valuable, right? But understand why you're going to certain camps. There are certain guys I'm like, hey, this fits you. Obviously, I know guys in coaching, so I was on staff a little bit at Miami. I was also on staff at Georgia. And some of my ex teammates are actually coaching. So like Ryan Williams, QB coach for Georgia State. He was a quarterback with me at Miami. One of my old linebackers at Miami, Trent Williams, he's actually on staff at Illinois. I was actually with them yesterday. And so again, some of it's just connection based. But a lot of for me, it's more of the hey, if you're trying to get recruited, these are the best places, whether it's college camps or like the Rivals, Under Armour, right? Go to camps where there's actually a camera, guys are recording you. You know that film's getting sent out to a coach.
Yeah, no, awesome. That's great, and that's a good segue because one of the things I wanted to ask you too is just based off of your experience going through the recruiting process and stuff that you see nowadays. Like a lot of the guys watching this are not so much because we get a ton of questions from guys who are maybe not in the biggest football markets. Like they're not in Florida, they're not in Texas, California, Georgia, things of that nature. Like what would be a strategy you think for them, other than attending camps, but like a strategy for them to maybe get them some more exposure, get them some more eyeballs, just based off of your experience and things that you had to deal with as well.
Yeah, I would say depending on your position group, one, find a guy that's grassroots, right? I feel like because of social media, because of NIL, there's a lot of guys that are money grab guys, but whether you have the connections or not, they're going to charge you an arm and a leg, to kind of get recruited. So find someone that's like, hey, I'm more about you working hard and let's build a plan. And then if we set this plan, then right, we're going to get you the offers. Because to me, that's where offers stick, and you see guys that actually wind up going to college do that, right? But I always think it's good to find someone that can help you get recruited, whether it's a quarterback coach or receivers coach. I know some people actually have a good platform specifically for marketing, right? So it's like one, do you due diligence on that side because I do think there is some leverage which is coaching following people, right? Like we offer a service, but we do recruiting through social media, right? But it's our head guy. So it's David Morris. He has a bunch of college and even NFL coaches that follows him, right? So if he posts something and a coach likes it, the odds of a coach actually seeing the odds of it going up. Right. So being smart about who you choose to kind of saying, hey, I'm going to allow you to help me with marketing because, again, there are thousands of you guys. There's only a certain amount of coaches, only so many hours in a day. Right. But again, if
Hmm.
you know, hey, this one guy has, hundreds of quarterback coaches and I'm a quarterback, right? It might be worth me saying, hey, if I work on this, right, will you post me once I look, right? Correct. I always tell my guys, right? A lot of people want to post a lot of film. To me, it's not about that, right? It's about saying, hey, if I have an hour workout, taking one or two of your best clips and posting that. I don't need a 5 minute workout every day. I don't need a whole movie of watching you work out. I always say the more chances of you exposing yourself to you doing something wrong, the more chances of coach will say, hey, this is what I don't like about you. Right. So
Hmm.
being smart with how you actually expose yourself. I know some people are, very big on posting as much content. But as much as I've seen content help guys, I've also seen content also hurt guys. Right. So being smart with what you post, and different things like that. I always say make it different, right? If you're a quarterback, one day maybe it's a fade, right? One day maybe it's all platform. One day maybe it's rolling right or left, right? One day maybe it's one movement, right? So show coaches, hey, it's maybe it's 1 hour practice, right? But it's the best two or three clips, throughout those different segments, and you're showing different types of throws. So being smart about actually how you market, but I think there's definitely some ways to use social media, and some of these guys like yourself, right, done a great job of promoting themselves and building a good platform to kind of help some of these guys grab their attention.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. That's something that I wouldn't even think about. So that's awesome. I know guys will get a ton of benefit out of that. Is that something you did, or were you more so like obviously game's different now, but is in terms of recruiting? But is that something that you did personally, or you picked that up along the way, or picked that up as a coach on a staff?
Yeah, so a lot of this was some of it me learning it, some of it just David Morse. So when I was in high school, so QB Country is based out of Mobile, and then when I
Hmm.
kind of came up, David connected with me, and how my recruiting process started was David knew James Coley because Coley was at Florida State, right, and that was when
Hmm.
Jake Coker was there. Coker wound up then transferring to Alabama. Coley wound up then going to Miami. David Morris knew I was a big Miami fan, wind up saying, hey, I might have a guy for you. Coley flew up and saw me. Right. So at least when I was growing up, it was a lot more of those kind of connections.
Yeah.
And it's very hard now. I know there's restrictions with like head coaches flying. The recruiting process has changed. Right. So some of our stuff is still trying to be as grassroots as possible. But I think that it's very smart with as many coaches that are on social media capitalizing on that now. That's one thing that we've been trying to get better at as like a, development saying, hey, how can we use social media to push our guys? Right. Again, I think if a guy's a 4 or 5 star, right, he's 6'6", those guys to me pass the look test. Right. But it's those
Yeah.
guys kind of on the fringe where it's like, hey, they're a dude, but they need help. Right. Those are the guys where I think could really use social media because, again, to me, it only takes one coach. I'll give you guys kind of an insight. When I was at Georgia, they had something called the Six State. Right. So what the Six State was, and it was terrible, especially the state of Florida. Every state that touched Georgia, even obviously including Georgia, they had to do a weekly report on every kid that got an offer. Right? It didn't
Oh
matter if it
wow.
was Big D1, it didn't matter if it was like Moore State, JUCO. Right? And from there, what it allowed Georgia to do was once you get that first offer, now it allowed a guy like me to go in and say, hey, let me see what this guy's really about. Right. So for
Huh.
me, I know a lot of guys really want to chase the Georgia, the Alabama, right? And I tell my guys, just chase the first offer. Right. To me, it's no
Yeah.
different in the NFL. It's not about having all 32 teams like you. It's about having one. That's all you need. Right. And then again,
Hmm.
the marketing, right? How you kind of, present yourself and the product you put on, that's a different story. Right. But I always say start small, try to get that first. Like my first one was Furman. Right. And again, when Furman called,
Hmm.
then I had Alabama, then I had Auburn, then LSU, then all these schools. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, well, why is the school looking into this guy? And so again, I think that that's sometimes where I think because of the big names, guys kind of get lost in the recruiting process instead of saying, hey, let me find one school that likes me. They try to say, hey, let me find, the biggest school that likes me. And again, sometimes you'll get very lost. And to me, I think that if that would have been my approach, right, I would have got lost. But I was like, hey, I want to find the teams that like me. I want to find a way to get my first offer. And then once I get it, right, and I prove that I deserve to be in college, right, how do I build off of that?
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. That's a crazy road. Do most schools do that to your knowledge, or is that just something that you did at Georgia?
Not to my knowledge. It was definitely something they did at Georgia. It was
Yeah.
it was a lot of man, a lot of manpower. And
Yeah.
a lot of hours, especially Florida, man. Florida would be crazy some weeks because you're having, especially like the freshman sophomore class, you're having guys getting random offers all the time.
Yeah.
Keeping up with those guys, and even in the summer, actually, I would say this the summertime is probably the worst because that's when all the
Really.
coaches are on the road. So guys are getting
Ah.
offers all throughout the summertime. So I would say summer's the worst, to be honest with you, because I know my social media is usually blowing up on my feed with coaches tagging, different guys, and different players that are getting, their first offer. All these schools that are coming, like Columbus or St. Thomas, right? They're going to have 30, 40 colleges come to their
Yeah.
school, kind of, during their springtime. So they'll start getting the offers kind of going spring and summer. So for us, kind of that late spring, early summer was usually the worst with the offers kind of shooting out.
Got it. Yeah, yeah, got it, got it. So did you? How long were you? So you said you coached for a bit at Miami and Georgia. Were you there just for a couple of years, and then you got kind of more so into the private side of things?
Yeah, so with Miami, I would say I was more in recruiting. So I did a lot of
Mhm.
stuff with recruiting film, recruiting breakdown. I mean, it wasn't really coaching. I wasn't on staff on that sense, but I was more on the recruiting side. I mean, I did talk to the players, obviously help them out in ways that I can. But when I got to Georgia, because Todd Hartley and I had a lot more connections there, I helped with Georgia with like installs. I was in the meetings with the guys, different things like that. So it was more hands-on in Georgia, and that's kind of where I saw, more the approach of like the sixth state and different
Yeah.
things like that. And Kirby really opened up the doors to me to say, hey, any meetings you want to be in. I didn't go into defensive meetings, right? But any meetings you want to be in, I have no problem. So I was in like the quarterback meetings, I was in the OC meetings, all the recruiting meetings, obviously. So I got a really cool perspective of like full scale of how recruiting and coaching kind of go hand in hand. And again, at Miami, it was solely recruiting, but when I got to Georgia, it was more coaching and recruiting.
Got it. Yeah, yeah, got it. No, that makes sense. So, like, as a player, when you were at Miami, what was that? I think I read your first year there. Did you decide to redshirt? Did that have to do with baseball, or was that just
So
what factored into that decision?
so me and Brad came in as a freshman together.
Okay.
So Ryan Williams was supposed to be the starter. He went down. He had he tore his ACL in like a crazy, just like naked bootleg. He tried to like make a quick move, and all of a sudden ACL snaps. All right. So me and Brad came in, and then I remember we also had the transfer Jake Heaps. So it was
Hmm.
all of us. And so I was like, I was more of an athlete, not a quarterback, right? And I tell a lot of my guys, right, it is great to be an athlete, but everyone in college is an athlete. You will not beat guys
Yeah.
unless you are a Lamar Jackson or a Kyler Murray type. You're not going to out athlete most athletes in college, right? But
Yeah.
you can outthink a lot of them. Right, so that's really the side of the game that I had to learn was saying, "Hey, be smart with decision making." Right, I also had to put on some weight. I was a mobile guy, but I was like 180. Right, so I went from like 180 to like 210 all in 1 year.
Oh
Right, so I
wow.
put on a lot of weight, and so I was really
Yeah.
big into the strength and conditioning program. By the time I graduate, I actually hold the power clean record for quarterbacks.
Oh
So I was
wow.
pretty strong by the time I left. And so that was my big thing was, hey, I want to get bigger, faster, stronger, right? There's some things in the game that I got to learn. And that's kind of how I approached it was saying, hey, I know I'm athletically gifted. I can make plays, right? But again, if a team boxed me in and I had to kind of just play the position of quarterback, I don't know if I could beat, a top 10 team. And that was something that I
Mhm.
really had to learn. And a guy like Brad, those guys really kind of helped me, film study, what to watch. I always say, some guys watch film, other guys understand film, right? And the meaning of that is, have you ever, and I tell a lot of my guys, have you ever been a little kid and you watched a movie, right? Now you're, 16, 17, 18, you watch the same movie, and now some of the references you start to understand what's really going on and what they really start to mean, right? It's the same thing, right? If you watch film and you see
Yeah.
cover two, okay, I see it, right? But when you really start to understand, okay, Sam's inside, right? This their leverage, corner's going to be. So that to me is now you're understanding what you're looking at, right? And that was
Yeah.
stuff that Brad and them really kind of helped me understand. Me and Brad lived together, so we did a lot of film study. So to me, it was more of a learning curve my freshman year, and also I wanted to kind of focus on baseball to see, hey, I know my chance of competing, they're gonna let me compete, but the chance of me starting is slim, right? But if I can at least redshirt, get bigger, faster, stronger, and still do the baseball side, to me, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, that makes I love that analogy about film. That's a great analogy. That makes a ton of sense. Is when after your redshirt year, what's that like? Because I know a lot of people watching this are guys that want to play college ball, maybe not at the D1 level. Some guys obviously, and then some guys want to play just any college ball anywhere. What's that schedule like? Like what's because I think a lot of people don't understand that when they're talking about college ball. So like what's that schedule like being a Division 1 quarterback?
Okay, so the first way I'll break it down for like solo sport and football, and then the second
Mhm.
way I'll break it down for my two sport athletes, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that are two sport and they want to do both. So Solo sport, and again, this is why I tell a lot of my guys, you got to understand who you are, right? Like when I was at Miami, we had morning practices, right? So when I first got there, there was no indoor, and obviously in the afternoons, because it's so hot in the morning times, it rains most afternoons in South Florida, right? When we got to Georgia, Georgia had afternoon practices, right? So it was a little more kind of like your high school schedule. You went to class in the morning, right? You'd eat lunch, you go to weight room, and then you're at practice. At Miami, it was more breakfast in the morning, practice, class, weight room, eat again, right? So at Miami, it was I was up at 5:45, and again, you got to understand. This is why I tell my guys, you do not want to be hurt. When I was hurt, I was up at 5 a.m. I had to be in the training room by 5:30, right?
Yeah.
Breakfast was between 6 to like 6:20 ish, right? That ended by 6:45. You had to be dressed and ready for meetings by 7:05. Meetings went from 7:05 to 7:45 for the quarterback specifically. You're going to be probably with your OC and quarterback coach for the entire time. Other skill positions, they'll go from like, punt to punt return. Then the last 15 minutes, they'll get with their positions, right? But they're kind of moving around for quarterbacks. We're more going to stay in the same spot unless, right, you're like a field goal holder, or sorry, not field goal holder. Yeah, the holder for the field goal, right? You might go into, field goal team, right? To kind of talk about, hey, maybe there's a fake this week you guys are going to put in, right? They might pull the backup over there into that meeting just so he can understand what they're going to call. But outside of that, you're in meetings. From there, the biggest thing I tell my guys, and again, I don't like to spill this, but I will. Play retention is one of the biggest things that we'll talk about after, but play retention is very important, right? So 7:10, 7:45 meetings. Right after that, you're on the field. We practice from like 8:10 probably until like 11:30, 11:40. Right after that, when I was with Al Golden and Coley, there was a little more. It was different, but it was a little more intense to where you had to do hurdles, and it was like walking hurdles. So they had like these little hurdles, and you had to put your hands behind your head, right? And you're walking vertically over it. You're
Yeah.
walking backwards, sideways, left, right, right. And you had to stretch your growing out, and everyone had to do 5 minutes of an ice bath after every practice. Then you
Oh,
would change. Then you would go eat. Then you're going to class, and to me, for the guys that go to college, be smart by how you stack your classes. I feel that's something that a lot of people don't do. Is they kind of want to stack everything on one day, and to me, you get overloaded, right? So spreading it out, giving yourself, hey, if I know that, I'm an O lineman, I get tired real fast, right? Maybe say, hey, can I not have my first class until 2, right? So you give yourself kind of that hour nap so you can rest and then be focused for class, right? But usually for us, sometime in the afternoon between like 12:45 was the earliest, or right after practice, you're showering and you're literally, there was no like mopeds or anything, so you're walking all the way across campus in 9-degree heat. By the time I got to practice, or my practice, by the time I got from practice to classes, I'm drenched in sweat, right? And I
yeah.
was in classes from like 2 till 4:45 if I was taking 2 classes that day. Then you have lunch check-in. So lunch check-in was usually between like 5 to 7. Then after that, depending on if you were injured, you'd have to at least go to 1 or 2 more medical updates throughout your schedule. If you're like have a knee injury, then you're going in there to get, red laser and stuff. And then if you're a freshman specifically, this is where your grades are important. You have study hall. You have to
Hmm.
report in for at least an hour. Right. And for me, I was smart because I'm a quarterback and I was like, hey, if I have, all A's and B's, can I get out of study hall? Right. So they allowed
Yeah.
me after my first after my first semester, I was like, I'm done with it. Right. It was more of
Yeah.
prove yourself, you're good. But again, you have the study hall aspect, which those are mandatory. And again, if you guys miss any of this stuff, all this stuff is mandatory. And I remember for me, they would have checkers, especially in the freshman class, right? Because usually you're taking a lot of 101 classes and things like that, unless you were, smart and took AP classes in high school that kind of, have you. But for the most part, most guys are going in with a lot of 101 classes, right? So there's going to be a checker. There's someone that's going to sit out there. And if you're 1 minute late, you have sunrise. You are up the next morning at 5 a.m. You were getting a text that you were up and they're going to punish you, right? So being always they tell us 5 minutes early, right? At one point it was bad with Rick. Rick, if you didn't show up 5 minutes early unless you had a really good excuse, they would write you off. You weren't 5 minutes early because that was the standard Rick was trying to set. That we're going to be the class early, right? We're going to be the first ones there, last ones to leave, right? So
Hmm.
class is very important for a lot of these guys too, because again, for a quarterback, they don't want to have to worry about your grades. There's a ton of stuff they got to teach you
Yep.
on the field. There's a ton of stuff they got to worry about with other guys, right? The last thing they want to worry about is my quarterback can't, handle the classroom or handle stuff, obviously off the field. But again, most part, I would say it's about 5:45 a.m. to around like 8, 9:30, and you're back in bed.
Yep.
It's usually
15 hour days, damn near. That's
yeah,
that's nuts. And
and
then with baseball, is that tacked on at the end?
Yeah,
Is
so
that
baseball was different. So baseball was in the spring. So honestly, Mondays and Wednesdays, even Fridays, super chill for me, right? Because my class schedule, I shifted my classes in the afternoon, obviously because of football, right? But in the spring, we only practice Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, there's nothing in the morning. I'm sleeping in, I'm relaxing.
yeah.
Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays, terrible. So wake up, obviously, again, 5:45, 6 a.m. breakfast, morning practice, right? I tried to make it to where I did not have any classes on Tuesday, Thursdays. By 12, I was in the medical room usually every day because of how hot it is in the spring. I have an IV in me. So usually get an
Mm.
IV. I would then start hitting around 2:45-ish, maybe 3:45. Practice from, then all the way until 6, 7. If you're a freshman, you're still going to study hall, right? You still have to check in for all the football lunches.
Yeah.
I remember one time the team had someone on with one of the skill guys, and I had to be up at on a Thursday, and we had a game that afternoon. I had to be up at 4:45 for a 5 a.m. sunrise because some skill guys missed, and I still had to be there. Right, so that day was
Oh.
like 4:45 all the way until like 10 because then we had like a 7 o'clock game. So
Yeah.
so with the dual sport, especially for like my football, baseball guys, right? It's a lot. Take care of your body. There's a lot of not only mental stress between staying focused between two sports and school, but also physically, right? You got to make sure you're hydrated, right? Especially if you're going to Florida schools, it's super hot in the spring. So
Hmm.
that was one thing that I had take into account was just like hydration. Even though you feel good, right? You get out there and you can pass out real quick. I've seen some guys, even some coaches faint just because of the humidity and the sun is kind of dangerous in South Florida.
Yeah. No, yeah, believe me. We had a camp last Saturday, Sunday in Houston, and it was like
Ooh, yeah.
95, super humid. I'm like, God, like
And then
somebody is rough.
you guys on grass or turf?
We're on grass, luckily.
Okay, that's better.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
so yeah,
luckily grass.
we had the turf field. We had two grass, one turf, and we did the practice on turf, no indoor. So once you
Oh,
got outside, there was no shade. There was no, hey, it's 101. Like there were some days you could literally see the heat waves on like the grass. That's how
oh
bad.
yeah,
And there's no
yeah,
indoor
yeah,
to run to. Now they got indoors. So Miami, they're lucky for that.
yeah, yeah,
Did
yeah, yeah.
not have that at all.
Oh man, that's funny. So you like you briefly touched on it. Like one of the biggest changes for you, like especially during that redshirt year, was just learning how to study film, learn how to actually play the position correctly. Besides like the IQ side of things, like what would you say from a quarterback's perspective purely were some things that you needed to improve on making the transition from high school to college? Like whether it's physical, like you mentioned having to put on some size, like what would you say specifically other than film, what to help you make that transition, at least easier, be able to prepare yourself to become an actual like college true and true quarterback player of the position.
Yeah, so first I tell a lot of my guys, right, by the time you get there, everyone has something freakish, right? So I wasn't, I was the strongest at one point, right? When I came in at first, right, I wasn't the strongest, I wasn't the fastest, I wasn't the tallest, I wasn't the smartest, right? But I had other things. If you were the smartest, then you probably weren't more athletic than me, right? If you were taller than me, there was different aspects that I had that other guys didn't, right? So I always say when you go in there, just understand what you're good at, right, and play within that, right? And then again, as you grow, your potential should also kind of go with that. Right. So
Hmm.
that was the first thing that I really had to understand was, hey, what am I good at? What am I not? Right. And things that I'm good at, how do I consistently do that? And things that I'm bad at, how do I consistently say, hey, I do not want to repeat that mistake again. Right. I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of the guys is just the ability to understand that and then play within that. Right. Like one guy that I really love. I always tell a lot of my guys, whether athletic or not, go watch Gardner Minshew. Right. His story is went to ECU. ECU coach told him you don't have enough arm strength, right? He transferred to Alabama to be a coach. Rest in peace, Mike Leach reached out to him and said, hey, man, we think you're good enough. Come play for us, right? He went to Washington State and balled out, right? But everyone, the old school pea shooter, right, maybe throws it 60, 65 yards, right? But it's super accurate, right? That has a great job with his feet and his timing, right? So that was one thing that I had to learn. Coley always had something that was called change the game, right? It made a lot of sense. Hey, we want to make plays, we want to be athletes, right? But when Rick came, it was more of, hey, I don't want to make mistakes. I want to say, hey, how can I end every drive in a punt or a kick or a field goal? Right. So it was kind of shifting my mindset of saying, hey, I'm just an athlete to say, hey, how do I, become kind of like this Tom Brady saying, hey, I want to become the best quarterback and then allow my athletic ability to kind of take over when it has to. right? So that was my first approach. The second one we kind of talked about is play retention, right? I tell a lot
Yeah.
of my guys one thing that is really really good, right? Is each week, especially like in the summertime, right? You're probably going to have like 100, maybe 85 plays, somewhere between the 85 to 100 plays installed, right? But when you go into a game week, you're only going to have maybe 35 to 50. Right, you're gonna have different variations, maybe different tags you like, right? Different things like that. For the most part, you're not gonna go in with your entire playbook into a game, right? But each week the plays are going to slightly change. When I'm saying, hey, I remember, Tuesday is the run game, right? If they call gun double right eagle, you better know what gun double right eagle is, right? Because you're going to learn it at 7 a.m. and then at 8:50 you're running that play, and you got to be
Hmm.
perfect. You got to make sure you know where guys are going, what they're doing, where the mic deck is, where the safety is, where the checks are, right? And that's one thing that I try to work with my kids, saying, hey, right, I'm gonna draw the play at the beginning of this practice. Right, once the play's over with, can you retain it during this session, right? This hour session, however long we're going, and then repeat it back to me. Show me where everyone's going. Show me where everyone's lined up. Right? I think that's one side that you see guys get out there, and they can say it to you sometimes when they get out there and they kind of don't necessarily retain the information from board work actually to field work. Right. And that's some of the biggest stuff that people got to understand, because it doesn't matter how good of a gamer you are. If you can't show a coach consistently in practice you can do the right thing, it's very hard for them to play you.
Hmm.
So outside of that, the last thing I would say, and we kind of touched on, is strength and conditioning, right?
Yeah.
Again, unless you're blessed, and Miami is now, and I'm kind of upset about it. Unless you're blessed like a top five offensive line, right? You're probably going to get hit a couple times, right? And
Hmm.
again, making sure that you can protect yourself, putting on size, putting on strength, right? A lot of guys, I tell them, right? People talk about a lot with body control with receivers, right? You talk about like George Pickens, right? Be able to make acrobatic catches, whether it's Tyreek Hill, right? And I use Tyreek for a lot of my guys, right? The thing I love about Tyreek is Tyreek can move 100 miles an hour and then stop on a dime and then redirect and move again. And a lot of guys
Hmm.
talk about that with receiver play, but I talk about also with quarterbacks, right? When you're doing a spin move and you're going to make a throw after, right? Is your shoulder down? Where's your body mechanics, right? Can you control your body as you're moving? Right. And usually where
Hmm.
you see a lot of the disconnect is when a guy adds on 10, 15, 20 pounds, and all of a sudden he was moving lightning quick and control his body, and all of a sudden he's moving with 20 extra weight or 20 extra pounds, and starting to weigh him down and start to affect mechanical stuff. So body control to me is one aspect that I feel like not a lot of people talk about with quarterbacks. But when you watch the good one, whether it's like a Patrick Mahomes or a Lamar, when they go to throw, they're usually in a really really good throwing position. No matter how
Hmm.
fast or what maneuver they're doing, when they get to throw, they're usually in a good throwing position, right? Because they have
Yeah.
very good body control as well as obviously speed and acceleration.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. No, yeah, that play retention, that's super. I like that. Like before, show them before a session, have them go a session, then ask them after. That's
Because they got to
awesome, man.
retain
That's
the play, yeah. And then,
yeah.
and if they're smart enough right now, you go, okay, if it's cover two, what are we doing, right? And you can kind of talk a little bit of defense real quick with them, right? But sometimes
Hmm.
the hardest thing with that is for me, I love film. I'm a film junkie. Sometimes I spend too much time on that, so I'm like, okay, we got to
Yeah,
be quick,
yeah.
so we got to go. But I think that's good for guys, right? And then the one more point I'll add is for my young quarterbacks, no play types, not play names, right? And again, there's staples, right? Like white cross, mesh, right? Shallow. But when when I was in high school, we ran the Tony Franklin system, right? So a lot of, hey, 95 number systems, right? Different things like that. But again, for us, 95 was white cross, but I learned it as 95. So it took me mentally rewiring my brain and saying, hey, this is white cross, not 95, but the play was the same, right? So I tell my guys, hey, you can call, like, it's kind of like the tomato, right? You see the tomato, you might call it tomato, I might call it tomato, but it's the same thing,
Hmm.
right? And that's the same thing to me with play types, right? Understand the structure of the play. And again, if it's a staple, learn the name, right? Like I think no one's going to change flood or why shallow, right? But there are
Yeah.
certain play types where it's like, you might call it dig, I might call it dagger, right? But it's a split with a dig coming behind it, right? Learn that, not just okay, I've only seen as dig. Hey, it's a split with a dig, right? Whether you call it dig or dagger, still the same thing. So that's kind of
Hmm.
why I've been trying to teach my guys, because again, that's to me some of the learning curve too. Is some of these guys are spent, especially some of these guys go to these ones that are like K through 12, right? They might learn one offense their entire life, right?
Yeah.
Because middle school and JV and then varsity, and now they're learning if
Hmm.
they have a chance to go to college. It's a whole new world, whole new playbook, right? And that's one of the biggest things I have is, say you got to learn new terminology, let the play names go, but understand the concept.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. So yeah, like, and so obviously you do a lot of quarterback training now, and then you mentioned to me a little bit ago, you have like a camp series that you guys are going to be doing where you'll be working with quarterbacks, I would assume.
Yeah, so if you follow me at Malik Rosier 12, what we're doing right now, we're starting in Florida, and then we're definitely going to expand out. It's a 2-day camp. So Saturday, we're going to have cameras going. We're even working with, and again, we can't have D1s, but we're working with JUCOs, D2s, and some NAIA schools to come out and actually coach the guys on Saturday, so they'll get a hands-on feel with coaches, as well as the drills will be recorded. One of the cool things, and again, I've been to camps, right? Usually they have one guy recording. We're going to have cameras that's going to capture every drill at every point, right? So every drill you go through will be recorded. So instead of you saying, hey, I only had this one drill recorded that took 5 minutes out of a 30-minute drill, right? If we're there for 30 minutes doing drill work, all 30 minutes are being captured, right? So guys will be able to have film to kind of see, send out different things like that. Then on Saturday, obviously the 7-on-7 aspect is growing up. I think Pylon, different groups like that, OT7 doing a great job, kind of branding 7-on-7 as something that's unique. So instead of it being the travel teams, all the kids that are coming, it'll be a high school base, right? So the way we're
Mm,
doing it is it'll be like the one we're going to do is I know for sure it's going to be in Plant City, right? So you'll have like Tampa Catholic versus Armwood versus Tampa Tech
nice.
versus Cocoa. Instead of it being like, you know, whatever the South Florida,
Like DEF CON or something
yeah,
like that.
instead of being
Yeah.
7-on-7 teams, to me, it's going to be actual high school teams right before, because it'd be in the summertime, right before the season to say, hey, like, what do we have? What concepts, right? We're going to do a money give back. So we're going to have a 7-on-7 and even a 5-on-5. So we want the whole team involved, right? So if you're an O-line, D-line guy, we'll do the 5-on-5, $5,000 cash prize. I'm working with some of the guys that I played football with, or even, done some training with. I'm trying to do some college or NFL athletes actually come out on that Sunday before the 7-on-7 start and actually talk to the student athletes for a couple of minutes. So we're gonna do some
Yeah.
different stuff like that. We're bringing a DJ. It's gonna be a lot of fun. But again, if you guys follow me at Malik Roger 12, you guys will see more stuff. And again, this is not for the individual. This is for your high school, right? So if you guys live in Florida, at least for now, we're going to expand out. I know we're looking at Virginia, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee for next year. But it'll be your actual high school coming together as a team and competing at an event together, instead of it being your travel team or you solely, coming out to this event.
Love it, man. That's great. And we'll put your socials in the description of this video as well. And if then there's a website or anything like that that you want me to link out, we could obviously do that too.
Okay,
But that's
perfect.
awesome, man. There's something like that in Southern California. It's called Forvert. And it's similar. They have a lot of success, but it's more so like seventh and eighth grade teams. So it's a way for the high schools to kind of recruit the players, but it's all high schools going against each other, and it's super. But so it's a great freaking idea. I love that idea. That's awesome. That's great.
I'm big on that too, because my biggest thing, and again, I love the 7-on-7 scene. This is what I tell my quarterbacks for the 7-on-7 scene. Two things. One, unless you do something freakish, it's very hard for you to actually get recruited from 7-on-7, right? To me, that's more
Hmm.
DBs, linebackers, receiver, right? They make a 360 one-handed grab, and it's like, okay, that kid can, right, make a play, right? But for quarterbacks, because there's no rush, there's no maneuvering, right? To me, it's kind of hard to see, okay, well, if there's a line in front of you, how do you react, right? Because some guys are going to run fast, other guys are going to step up, make a throw, and take a hit, right? So you can't really see that in 7-on-7. The second one, this is really, really big for me. Guys, please take a drop. Secondly,
Yeah.
throw. Do not throw from the line of scrimmage. It's a sack, right? So
Yeah.
I tell my guys, right? I don't necessarily care the 7-on-7. I think it's great for reps, for looks, for concepts, right? But if you think that you're going to throw a post and take a one-step drop versus a really good defense, you're wrong, right? So,
Hmm.
and taking your drops, building your timing, building your rhythm, right? To me, that makes the 7-on-7 worth it. So it translates over to your high school games where the coaches are really going to watch you more than I want to take one steps and get the ball out quick. But now you have no drop, your form's off. Coaches are like, well, this guy doesn't even look like he knows what he's doing, right? So to me, it's like you got to put the training you've been doing. The obviously think about, hey, like I always say, the brain cannot tell, if you do a good job, the difference between reality and imagination, right? So if you ever take a second, right, close your eyes, say, hey, I remember playing this rivalry game and they had a good offensive line. I remember running Y cross, right? Take a second, close your eyes. So right now, kind of feel how deep was your drop? Where did you have to move? Right, feel yourself moving up in the pocket. To me, if you can kind of try to imagine yourself with a pocket in front of you, it kind of helps you feel like, hey, I need to get back. right? And again, I know it's kind of
Yep.
hard, but I always say if you close your eyes for a second, kind of imagine it, sometimes it helps you. Right? I remember like you know, if you think about a great memory, right, whether it was your parents, your loved ones, right, you kind of can remember what you saw, right, what they wore, or what they looked like. Sometimes guys are good enough to say, hey, I remember how the grass smelled, right, what perfume my mom was wearing that day. Right, it's the same way in football, right? Remember the smell of the grass. Remember how the pads felt, right? Remember that helmet kind of weighing your head down a little bit, right? Kind of put yourself in that scenario so when you drop, it feels a little more realistic.
Yeah. No, I love it, man. That's that. Yeah, that's a lot of with the guys that I train, especially the younger guys. I'm not even the biggest fan of 7-on-7 for them. Like you said, it can be good for reps, but like it's just there's a lot of elements of it that are extremely unrealistic and not the
Yeah.
best.
No, you're right. There's a what's the old saying? For every one bad rep, it takes three perfect reps to correct. Right. So unless
Love
you're doing
it.
a lot of things right, you're gonna wind up creating more bad habits than good habits. And I always say when you add in an O line and D line and everything speeds up, your bad habits become worse.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
And so again,
100%.
that's to me. I love the 7-on-7 scene, but again, unless you have a really good coach or a guy that's telling you to get back and work your drops, to me, it more hurts you than anything else.
Yeah, especially the quarterback position. The
Yeah.
skill guys, like you said, yeah, get probably a little more benefit out of it. It's a little bit more realistic for them, but quarterbacks especially 100%.
Yeah, I mean, you got two 5-star corners going to get, or 5-star corner, 5-star receiver. You can see the matchup, right? It's a little
Yeah.
hard for the quarterback. So to me, that's where like skill guys actually have more of that chance when you see, but oh yeah, get you offers. Yeah, to me, it's skill guys, not necessarily, the quarterbacks. Again, if you go out there one day and rip an 80-yard bomb, then maybe, guys might turn their head, you start ripping bombs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, that to me is more the exception, not the rule, where it's like,
Uh,
being more consistent is really going to help you.
cool. Yeah. Well, awesome, Malik. Listen, I appreciate you being on here, man. Appreciate you sharing all of that. That's a ton of knowledge for our guys. So I really, really appreciate it. Where so Malik Rosier .12, is that on Instagram? That's where we can
Yeah,
find
so
you?
my Instagram is Malik_Rosier 12, and then my Twitter is Malik Rosier 12. So a lot of the stuff with
Perfect.
the marketing, you'll see it on Instagram, but I do more of the marketing stuff on Twitter, especially for the camp series. For any guys that are in South Florida that's looking for a chance to get recruited, this is a way of saying, hey, maybe you didn't get that Under Armour or that Rivals invite that you really wanted, right? But this is another way to get exposure, whether it's a small college, and again, we're going to work on getting this film into some of the big colleges. Again, I've been doing a lot of networking. I was just with Illinois yesterday with one of my clients. Again, my friend Trent Harris is on staff. I actually remember Miami recruiting Arthur. So Arthur was a quarterback at Rutgers. Now he's on staff at Illinois as a QB coach. So I have a lot of connections I'm slowly going to build. So we're going to get this film into the coach's hands. So if you're looking for a way to get recruited, right, get your coach on board. It's be a great way, to get your team and yourself a way to get recruited.
Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, we'll link that. We'll link your Twitter. We'll link your Instagram in the description below. But yeah, man, thank you so much for being on here. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you again.
Nah, thank you. Hope you have a great day.
Yeah, you too, man.